My parents always had a particular way of seeing the world, and by extension, their two daughters. It felt like a fundamental truth of our household, one I couldn't quite articulate until much later. My older sister, Chloe, seemed to glide through childhood with a kind of effortless access. Meanwhile, my path involved a lot more independent navigating. It started subtly, extra funds for her school trips while I was out selling cookies to earn mine, or new clothes for her, while I rotated through hand-me-downs. By high school, the gap between our experiences wasn't just noticeable, it was a chasm. Chloe wasn't a natural academic. Math, science, reading, they just didn't click for her. My parents responded by hiring tutors, buying every study guide imaginable, and enrolling her in expensive prep courses. Me? I was pulling straight A's without any of that. I'd teach myself calculus from library books, ace my exams through sheer grit. But my report cards rarely earned more than a fleeting glance from my dad before he'd shift his focus back to whatever new academic hurdle Chloe was facing. "She needs more support," Mom would say, a familiar refrain whenever I questioned why Chloe got private tutors while I learned on my own. "You're naturally smart. Chloe has to work harder." That logic never sat right with me. I always thought working harder meant building the skills to succeed on your own. Instead, Chloe seemed to learn that if she struggled, someone would always swoop in. She never really developed resilience or problem-solving skills, because every time she stumbled, my parents were there to soften the landing. Senior year, though, that's when things really came to a head. I'd spent months diving deep into computer science programs. Ever since I took an elective sophomore year, coding had just clicked. It made sense to me in a way traditional subjects never did: the pure logic, the patterns, the ability to build something tangible from abstract ideas. Duke University had this incredible program, and my grades meant I was in serious contention for scholarships. So, one evening in March, I walked up to my parents at dinner. The acceptance letter was in my backpack, along with all the financial aid breakdowns. I'd crunched the numbers meticulously, factoring in scholarships, work-study, loans I could manage myself. "I got into Duke," I announced, trying to keep my voice level, but the excitement was practically vibrating through me. "For computer science, with a great financial aid package." "That's wonderful, honey," Mom said, but she didn't meet my eyes. "But we need to talk about next year." My dad slowly set down his fork. "Chloe didn't get into any four-year schools. Her test scores just weren't high enough," Dad said. "So we're enrolling her in the community college business program instead." I just stared, trying to connect that to my news. "Okay," I said slowly, "community college can be a great option for finding your footing." "It's expensive," Mom cut in. "More than we thought, especially with all the extra support she'll need: tutoring, coaching, counseling. We've crunched the numbers, and we simply can't afford to help both of you right now." The room felt like it was spinning. "You're saying you won't help me go to Duke?" My dad's voice was firm. "We're saying Chloe needs our help more. You're capable of succeeding anywhere. You can go to the state university in Richmond and do just fine. Chloe needs the structure and support of this specific program. It's designed for students who struggle academically." Panic started to bubble up. The state university doesn't have the same computer science opportunities. I protested. Duke's program could shape my entire career. I've worked 4 years for this. Mom reached across the table, her face pained but her decision clear. Sometimes we make sacrifices for family. Chloe's situation is more precarious. She needs a foundation before she can move forward. You already have that foundation. You'll succeed no matter where you go. That's not fair, I whispered. Life isn't fair, Dad shot back. You're smart enough to understand that. We're doing what's best for both our daughters, even if you can't see it right now. I left the table, dinner unfinished. Back in my room, I pulled out the Duke acceptance letter, rereading the words that had brought such intense hope just hours before. Duke wanted me. They saw my potential. My own parents, though, were telling me that potential didn't matter as much as my sister's struggles. The next few weeks felt like a blur. I called Duke's financial aid office, tried to explain my situation. They bumped my scholarship a bit, but the funding gap was still huge. I'd need my parents to co-sign loans at the very least, but they flat out refused. Mom even tried to frame it as a blessing, saying student debt would only burden my future. The financial aid counselor sounded genuinely baffled. Your academic record is exceptional, she said. Students with your qualifications typically have family support. Are you sure there's no way to reconsider? I explained as diplomatically as I could, skipping the years of favoritism and just focusing on the financial reality. She offered to look for other scholarships, but most deadlines had already passed. I just assumed parental support would be there, and by the time I realized it wouldn't, it was too late. Chloe, on the other hand, enrolled in community college with full fanfare. My parents threw a big celebration dinner, bought her a brand new laptop, even set up a dedicated study space in the guest room. I watched it all, feeling a quiet crack inside me as I filled out the paperwork for the state university in Richmond. The celebration dinner stung more than I'd anticipated. Extended family were there, congratulating Chloe as if starting community college at 18 was the same achievement as getting into Duke. My Aunt Carol pulled me aside in the kitchen, her face troubled. This doesn't seem right, she murmured. You got into one of the best schools in the country. Where's your celebration? I'm going to State University instead, I said, keeping my voice carefully neutral. It's more affordable. Aunt Carol's eyes narrowed. That wasn't your choice, though, was it? I didn't answer. Her expression hardened into anger. Later, I overheard her cornering Mom, voices raised from the living room, something about priorities, fairness, and how they could possibly do this. Mom's response was too quiet to catch. Aunt Carol left early, stopping at the door to give me a tight hug. You deserve better than this, she whispered. Don't let them convince you otherwise. The State University in Richmond wasn't terrible. Its computer science department was fine, just not Duke. It lacked the resources, the connections. But I dove into my coursework with a fierce focus, knowing I'd have to work twice as hard to forge my own opportunities. No safety net for me. Every success would be entirely my own making. I took a job at the campus IT help desk, hoarding every dollar. My parents weren't covering dorm costs, so I worked 20 hours a week on top of a full course load. Chloe, meanwhile, called home constantly with some new, minor crisis. Couldn't understand an assignment, didn't like a professor, felt overwhelmed. My parents immediately sprang into action, offering solutions and support. When I called to say I'd made the dean's list, Mom offered a quick congratulations, then spent the next 15 minutes talking about Chloe's mediocre grades. The contrast between us couldn't have been starker. My roommate, Megan, a pre-med student, picked up on my frustration after one particularly dismissive call with my parents. Why do you even bother calling them? She asked, looking up from her organic chemistry textbook. They're my family, I said, but the words felt hollow even as I spoke them. Family is supposed to support you, Megan countered. Mine drive me crazy about med school applications, but at least they care about my success. Yours act like your achievements are just background noise. She was right, and hearing it articulated so clearly stung. I started calling home less, letting weeks stretch between conversations. My parents never noticed the gaps, never reached out to bridge them. They only called when Chloe needed something. They'd expect me to offer advice on an assignment, explain a concept, or help with a project she'd left until the last minute. I tried to help Chloe occasionally during freshman year, rationalizing that her education mattered, even if my parents' approach was flawed. But each interaction just showed me how little she was actually learning. She wanted answers, not understanding, quick fixes, not genuine knowledge. By sophomore year, I stopped responding to her requests altogether. Sophomore year, something truly shifted. I stopped expecting anything from my parents and just focused on building my own future. A professor connected me with an internship at a tech startup in the historic district. The pay barely covered my expenses, but the experience was invaluable. I was learning real industry skills, making professional connections, and realizing I had talent that went far beyond just academic success. The startup ran out of this converted warehouse, full of recent grads coding furiously, fueled by pizza and energy drinks. The founder, David, a 30-something entrepreneur, took an interest in my work ethic and natural problem-solving aptitude. "You've got instincts most developers take years to develop," he told me after I debugged a critical system issue my second week. "Where did you learn to think like this?" "Necessity," I replied, completely honestly. "Nobody taught me, so I just figured things out myself." David nodded. "The best developers are self-taught. They learn because they need to, not because someone's making them. Keep showing up like this, and you'll go far." His mentorship became absolutely instrumental. He gave me increasingly complex projects, pushed me beyond my comfort zone, and offered feedback that genuinely helped me grow. This, I realized, was what true support looked like, not doing things for me, but challenging me to exceed my own expectations. Junior year brought an even better internship, this time at a larger company. They offered me a part-time position through the school year, which I jumped at. The money helped, but more importantly, I was building a resume that would speak for itself after graduation. I didn't need Duke's name if I had proven experience and genuine skills. Chloe, that same year, graduated from community college. My parents threw a massive party for her, inviting all the extended family to celebrate her associate's degree. I attended, smiled on cue, and felt absolutely nothing. She'd barely scraped by with C's, despite 2 years of intensive support. I'd made the dean's list for 6 straight semesters while working nearly full-time. "Nobody threw me parties," Chloe announced at her celebration, her voice bright with excitement. "I'm starting a business. I'm opening a boutique clothing store. Dad's helping me with the business plan." Mom was absolutely beaming. "We're so excited to support her entrepreneurial spirit." I cornered Dad in the kitchen later. "You're funding a clothing store?" "We're investing in her future," he corrected. "Chloe has vision. She understands style and trends. This could be very successful." "She barely passed her business classes," I pointed out. "Does she understand inventory management? Cash flow? Marketing?" "She'll learn," Dad said dismissively. "That's what the business is for. Practical education. Besides, we've hired a consultant to guide her through the first year." The whole thing made me sick. They were pouring money into a venture with massive failure risk, while I'd scraped by on ramen and student loans. Chloe had 0 retail experience, no management skills, no proven business acumen. She just had an idea, and parents willing to bankroll it. The boutique opened 6 months later in an expensive historic district location. Chloe had picked the spot for its foot traffic, but hadn't bothered researching local demographics or competition. There were already 3 established clothing stores with loyal customer bases within 2 blocks. The rent alone seemed astronomical for a startup, but of course, my parents covered it. I went to the grand opening out of obligation, watching Chloe flit around in designer clothes my parents had bought for the occasion. The boutique itself was beautiful, hardwood floors, expensive fixtures, carefully curated displays. Everything looked perfect, except the business fundamentals underneath. "What do you think?" Chloe asked, gesturing proudly at the merchandise. "Isn't it gorgeous?" "It's very pretty," I agreed. "Have you analyzed your price points against the local market? These seem quite high for the area." Her smile faltered. The consultant said premium pricing establishes brand value. "Premium pricing works when customers perceive premium value," I said, fingering a blouse with a $200 price tag. "This is nice, but I can find similar quality for half the price online." What makes your store worth the markup? The experience, Chloe replied, though she sounded less certain. Personal service, curated selection, the whole atmosphere. I didn't push it further, but my concerns, predictably, proved accurate. Within 3 months, Chloe was heavily discounting merchandise because nothing was selling at the original prices. Her curated selection just sat there, gathering dust, while she frantically ordered cheaper items to try and move inventory. The business plan, if you could even call it that, crumbled the moment it met reality. My parents poured in even more money for marketing campaigns that yielded minimal results. They hired a social media manager who posted beautifully filtered photos that generated likes, but no actual sales. They even invested in a loyalty program, but there were no loyal customers to reward. Every single expense chipped away at their retirement savings, while Chloe remained convinced the next strategy would turn everything around. That spring, graduated with highest honors and multiple job offers. A major tech company in Colorado wanted me for their software development team. The salary was more than I'd ever imagined earning right out of school. I accepted immediately, moved across the country without a second glance. My parents sent a card with $50 tucked inside, congratulating me on my achievement. They'd given Chloe $20,000 just for her boutique's opening costs. Colorado felt like true freedom. I rented a small apartment, furnished it with thrift store finds, and dove into my career with determined energy. The work itself was perfectly challenging, complex problems, creative solutions, brilliant colleagues, constant chances to learn new tech. I thrived in ways college never quite allowed. My apartment was tiny, a studio in a neighborhood that was still finding itself, but I didn't care. Every piece of furniture, every dish, every book on the shelf was mine because I'd earned it. No gifts with strings, no favors with expectations. Just my own space, reflecting my own choices. My team at the tech company welcomed me immediately. They operated on pure meritocracy, which felt revolutionary after years of watching Chloe get rewarded for mediocrity. Here, your code either worked or it didn't. Your solutions were elegant or clunky. Results mattered, not intentions, not effort, and certainly not how much support you'd received. Emily, the senior developer who mentored me, quickly became a close friend. She'd grown up in foster care, put herself through college without any family support. Our backgrounds were different, but we shared that same self-reliance born from necessity. "You've got that hungry look," she observed over lunch one day, a few months in. "Like you're trying to prove something." "Maybe I am," I admitted. I spent my whole life being told I didn't need help because I was naturally capable. Turns out they were right, just not in the way they meant. Emily laughed. Same. My foster parents said I was resilient enough to handle anything. They meant it as an excuse not to provide support, but they accidentally taught me I could survive without depending on anyone. Silver lining, I guess. Those conversations with Emily validated experiences I'd struggled to articulate. I wasn't bitter or resentful. I'd simply learned different lessons than my parents intended. Independence wasn't a gift they'd given me, it was a skill I developed despite them. I still called home monthly, out of obligation, enduring conversations that always revolved around Chloe's boutique. Sales were slow. She needed new inventory. The marketing wasn't working. Customers complained about prices. Each call brought new problems, new expenses, new reasons for my parents to pump in more money. Business takes time to establish, Mom insisted when I gently suggested Chloe might need to reevaluate her approach. She's learning valuable lessons. Expensive lessons, I murmured. We can afford it, Dad interjected, though I could hear the strain in his voice. Your sister is building something that matters more than short-term losses. I stopped offering opinions after that. Their money, their choices, their consequences to manage. I kept my focus laser-sharp on my own career, earning promotions and building expertise. My manager consistently praised my work. Within 2 years, I was leading a major project, managing developers, and interfacing directly with clients. Meanwhile, Chloe's boutique was hemorrhaging money. The inventory she ordered sat unsold because she'd chosen styles she liked, not what the market demanded. The expensive historic district location attracted browsers, but few actual buyers. She hired friends as employees, essentially paying them to socialize more than work. Every month brought a new crisis requiring parental intervention. 3 years after opening, Chloe announced she was expanding. "I'm opening a second location," she told me during a rare phone call. "The business is ready to grow." "How's the first location performing?" I asked carefully. "We're building brand recognition," she said, which, of course, wasn't an answer. "The new spot is in a shopping center with built-in traffic. It's going to change everything." The second location failed even faster than the first. The shopping center lease had restrictions Chloe hadn't bothered to research, limiting her operating hours and display options. She'd signed a 5-year contract without reading the fine print, committing to terms that made profitability nearly impossible. My parents, naturally, covered the penalties when she tried to break the lease early. For years into my career, I'd saved enough for a down payment on a condo. That mortgage felt like stability, concrete proof I'd built something real through my own effort. I decorated the space exactly how I wanted, filling it with books, tech, and art that truly spoke to me. This was mine in a way nothing ever had been. The condo search took months because I refused to compromise. Real estate agents kept trying to show me starter homes in marginal neighborhoods, suggesting I could upgrade later. But I'd started from nothing and worked my way up once already. This purchase was about arriving, not just beginning. The place I eventually bought was a 2-bedroom corner unit with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Sunlight flooded the living room every morning, and on clear days, I could see the mountains in the distance. The second bedroom became my home office, outfitted with the best tech I could afford. Waking up in that space every day, I felt a deep satisfaction of achievement that no one could diminish. My colleague Daniel helped me move in, along with Emily and a few other friends I'd made in Colorado. We hauled boxes up 3 flights, assembled furniture, and ordered pizza to celebrate. These people had become my chosen family, friends who valued me for my character, not what I could provide them. "This place is incredible," Daniel said, looking out at the view. "You've come a long way from that studio apartment." 5 years of saving and promotions, I replied, uncorking a bottle of wine. Every dollar of this down payment came from my own paycheck. That matters to me. Emily raised her glass. To earning what we have, and owing nothing to anyone who didn't support us getting here. Everyone drank to that. They understood, in ways my family never could. Chloe closed both boutique locations that same year. The failed business had swallowed over $200,000 of my parents' money, including retirement savings they'd planned for their later years. They never asked me for help during that crisis, which I appreciated. I wouldn't have given it anyway. "She's regrouping," Mom explained when I called after hearing the news through extended family. "Taking time to figure out her next venture." The boutique taught her so much. What did it teach her? I asked bluntly. Silence stretched across the line. That's not a kind question. It's an honest one, I countered. Chloe spent your retirement savings on a business she didn't research, didn't manage, and couldn't sustain. What lesson did she learn, besides that someone will always bail her out? You've become very harsh, Mom said quietly. Success has made you judgmental. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Success made me independent. There's a difference. We didn't speak for 3 months after that. Dad called once, leaving a voicemail about family loyalty and supporting each other through difficulties. I deleted it without responding. They'd never supported me through difficulties. They'd told me to figure it out alone while pouring resources into Chloe's every whim. My career kept advancing. At 28, I moved to a senior developer position at a different company, almost doubling my already comfortable salary. I traveled for conferences, spoke on panels about emerging technologies, and built a professional reputation that opened doors effortlessly. Everything I'd achieved came from my own work, my own choices, my own determination. Nobody had handed me anything. Then my phone rang on a Tuesday afternoon. Mom's name popped up on the screen, and something made me answer despite our strained relationship. "We need to talk," she said, no preamble. "Can you come home this weekend?" "I'm in the middle of a major project launch," I replied. "What's this about?" "It's about family. About helping your sister when she needs it most." The familiar phrasing triggered an immediate wall of resistance. "What does Chloe need now?" "She's in serious financial trouble," Mom admitted. "The boutique failures left her with significant debt. She's being sued by creditors, her credit is destroyed. She needs a fresh start." "That's unfortunate," I said, carefully. "But I'm not sure what you expect me to do about it." "We're asking you to help," Dad's voice joined in. They had me on speaker. "Chloe needs $120,000 to settle her debts and begin rebuilding. We've already contributed everything we can. We're asking you, as her sister, to step up." The number stunned me into temporary silence. $120,000. That was years of careful saving, investing, financial discipline. They wanted me to just hand it over to fix problems Chloe had created through pure carelessness and bad decisions. "No," I said simply. "You haven't even considered it." Mom protested. "This is your sister. Family helps family." "Family didn't help me get into Duke," I replied, my voice steady despite the anger starting to coil inside me. "Family didn't help me pay for state university. Family didn't help me work 20 hours a week while pulling straight A's. Family taught me to succeed independently, and I did. Now you want me to fund Chloe's failures with money I earned entirely on my own." "That's different," Dad argued. "You are capable of succeeding on your own. Chloe needs support." "Chloe needs consequences," I countered. "She's never experienced them. Every time she makes bad choices, you rescue her. You've taught her that decisions don't matter because someone will always fix the problems. Now you want me to continue that pattern? She'll lose everything," Mom said, her voice breaking. "Bankruptcy will ruin her future." "Bankruptcy is a consequence of her choices," I said. "Maybe experiencing it will teach her financial responsibility. Maybe struggling will force her to develop skills she's never needed before. Maybe this is exactly what she needs to grow up." "How can you be so cold?" Dad demanded. "This is your sister. This is the sister you prioritized over me my entire life," I shot back. "The sister you funded through mediocre grades while I excelled without help. The sister you gave a business to, despite her having no qualifications, using your retirement money while I saved every dollar I earned. Now you want me to sacrifice what I've built to rescue her from predictable failure?" "The answer is no. If you don't help, we'll lose our house," Mom whispered. "We co-signed some of Chloe's business loans. If she defaults, the creditors come after us." That revelation hit me like a physical blow. "You co-signed business loans for a boutique run by someone with no experience?" "We believed in her," Dad said defensively. "We thought parental support would make the difference." "Support doesn't override incompetence," I stated flatly. "You made that choice. You accepted that risk. Those consequences belong to you. So, you'll let your parents become homeless?" Mom's voice rose with desperation. "You'll stand by while we lose everything because you're angry about the past?" "I'm not angry about the past," I corrected. "I've moved beyond it. I built a life you had no part in creating. You taught me independence through neglect, and I succeeded despite your choices. Now you face consequences from your own decisions. That's fair. That's actually the first fair thing to happen in this family. Please, Mom begged. We're asking you to reconsider. Chloe is talking about giving up. She can't handle this pressure. We're terrified of what she might do. The manipulation was obvious, but it still managed to trigger a flicker of guilt. If Chloe is genuinely struggling with her mental health, she needs professional treatment, not money. I'll pay for therapy sessions. I won't pay her debts. Therapy won't solve her financial crisis, Dad snapped. Neither will my money, I replied. It'll just temporarily delay the inevitable. Chloe hasn't learned to manage money, run a business, or make responsible decisions. Giving her cash now means she'll be in the same position again in a few years. You know I'm right. Silence. They knew. They'd always known, but acknowledging it meant admitting they'd failed her through excessive support. We need an answer by Friday, Dad finally said. The creditors won't wait longer. You have my answer. It's no. It will remain no. Don't contact me about this again. I ended the call before they could respond. My hands shook slightly as I set the phone down. Part of me felt guilty for refusing, but a larger part felt vindicated. They'd made their choices. They'd prioritized Chloe's wants over my needs, funded her failures while I succeeded alone, and now expected me to rescue them from foreseeable consequences. The guilt faded over the next few days. I spoke with my therapist, someone I'd started seeing since moving to Colorado to process childhood issues. She helped me recognize the manipulation patterns, the unfair expectations, the constant disregard for my feelings and boundaries. You're allowed to say no, she reminded me during our session. You're allowed to protect what you've built. Their poor planning doesn't constitute your emergency. Friday came and went without contact. I assumed they'd either found another solution or simply faced the consequences. Life continued normally, work projects, social engagements, weekend hikes in the mountains. I was building a good life, surrounded by people who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. 2 months later, my Aunt Carol called. She was Mom's sister, someone I'd always liked, a voice of reason the immediate family often lacked. I heard about the situation with Chloe, she said carefully. Your mom called me crying last week. Did she ask you for money, too? I asked, a little dryly. She did, actually, Aunt Carol admitted. I told her no, my retirement is spoken for. There was a pause. I wanted you to know. Something, though. They sold the house. That surprised me. They're moving. They downsized to a small condo, used the equity to pay off Chloe's debts, and kept themselves from bankruptcy. Your mom is devastated, but they're stable now. Good, I said, and I truly meant it. They made choices and handled the consequences. That's how it should work. Your sister is living with them, Aunt Carol continued. She's working retail at a department store, minimum wage from what I understand. No college degree to help her get anything better, because she barely passed community college. That's real-world experience, I observed. Maybe it'll teach her something. Maybe, Aunt Carol sighed. Your mom wants me to convince you to reconcile. She says you've become heartless. I've become independent, I corrected. There's a difference. They created this situation through years of poor decisions. I'm not responsible for fixing it. I agree, Aunt Carol said, surprising me. I've watched your parents enable Chloe since she was small. They never let her fail, never made her face consequences. You, on the other hand, they left to sink or swim. And you swam. That's not heartless. That's survival. Her validation meant more than I expected. Thank you for saying that. You've built an impressive life, she went on. I've followed your career through the family grapevine. Your parents should be proud, instead of demanding you sacrifice your success for Chloe's failures. We talked for another hour, catching up on life beyond the family drama. Aunt Carol had always been that reasonable voice, the one who saw situations clearly, without emotional clouding. Talking with her reminded me that not everyone in the family subscribed to the dysfunction. 3 years passed. I bought a larger condo in an even better neighborhood, earned another promotion to engineering director, and started mentoring young developers entering the field. My life felt full, purposeful. The family situation faded to background noise, occasional updates through extended relatives, but no direct contact with my parents or Chloe. Then, one Saturday morning, Chloe showed up at my door. I'd just returned from a run, still in my workout clothes, when the doorbell rang. Opening it, I saw my sister, looking older, tired, wearing a retail uniform with a name tag pinned to her shirt. "Hi," she said quietly. "Can we talk?" For a moment, I considered just closing the door. Instead, I stepped aside and let her in. We sat in my living room, an awkward silence stretching between us. "Nice place," Chloe finally said, looking around my carefully decorated home. "You've done really well for yourself." "Thank you." I waited, refusing to make it easy for her. "I came to apologize," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "For everything. For the favoritism growing up, for the boutique disaster, for Mom and Dad asking you to bail me out, all of it." Her apology caught me off guard. "What brought this on?" "Therapy, actually. I've been seeing someone for 2 years now, working through a lot of things." Chloe twisted her hands together. "I never realized how unfair everything was. How much Mom and Dad gave me while you got nothing. How I took it all for granted." "That's good that you're working on it," I said carefully, still guarded. "The retail job has been eye-opening," she admitted. "I work 40 hours a week for barely enough to cover rent and food. I see what real work looks like, what earning money actually requires. I spent your parents' retirement savings on a business I had no right to run. I destroyed their financial security because I thought owning a boutique sounded fun." "Yes," I agreed, simply. "You did." "I don't expect you to forgive me," Chloe rushed on. "I just wanted you to know I understand now. You succeeded because you had to. Nobody gave you choices. Meanwhile, I failed because nobody ever made me try. The consequences are mine to live with." I studied my sister, seeing genuine remorse in her expression. "What do you want from me, Chloe?" "Nothing," she said, meeting my eyes directly. "I don't want money or help or anything else. I just wanted to tell you I'm sorry, and I understand why you said no. You were right. I needed to face consequences. I needed to learn what real struggle feels like. I'm still learning, honestly." Something in my chest loosened a fraction. "I appreciate you saying that." "Mom and Dad are struggling in the condo," Chloe added. "They're not used to living small. Dad talks about the house constantly. And Mom cries sometimes when she thinks nobody notices. But they're managing. We're all managing." "Good," I said, and I meant it without malice. Managing is what builds character. Chloe stood to leave. "I won't bother you again. I just needed to say this in person. You deserve to hear it." I walked her to the door. "Chloe, for what it's worth, I'm glad you're getting therapy. I hope you figure things out." "Thanks," she said with a small, sad smile. "I hope so, too." After she left, I sat in my living room for a long time, just processing. The apology didn't erase years of inequality and frustration, but it did acknowledge the reality I'd lived with alone. Chloe finally understood what I'd always known: advantages without effort create weakness, while struggle without support builds strength. My phone rang an hour later. Mom's name popped up, and after a moment's hesitation, I answered. Chloe told me she visited you, Mom said, no greeting. She said you were kind to her. I was honest with her, I corrected. There's a difference. I've been thinking a lot about the past, Mom continued, her voice heavy with emotion. About the choices your father and I made. We thought we were helping Chloe by supporting her so much. We thought you were strong enough not to need us. I became strong because I had no choice, I replied. You taught me independence through neglect. It worked, but not in the way you intended. I know, she whispered. I see that now. I see what you've accomplished completely on your own. And I see what Chloe became with too much help. We failed you both, just in opposite ways. Yes, I agreed. You did. Can you forgive us? The question hung in the air, laden with hope and fear. I considered carefully before responding. I can acknowledge that you did what you thought was right, even though it was wrong. I can accept that you loved us both, even though you showed it poorly. But forgiveness requires trust, and I don't trust you not to repeat these patterns. So, I don't know yet. That's fair, Mom said quietly. More fair than we deserve. Probably, I agreed. But fairness is something I value now, even when it's uncomfortable. We talked for another 30 minutes after that, mostly surface conversation about work and the weather, neutral topics. It wasn't a deep reconciliation, but it was communication without demands or manipulation. That felt like progress. The following year brought some unexpected changes. Dad had a health scare that forced an early retirement. Mom reached out to tell me, not asking for anything, just sharing information. I sent flowers to the hospital with a card wishing him well, small gestures that acknowledged our connection without reopening old wounds. Chloe got promoted to assistant manager at her retail job. She called to tell me herself, pride evident in her voice despite the modest achievement. It's not running my own business, she said with self-aware humor. But I earned it honestly. Congratulations, I told her sincerely. Honest achievement matters more than impressive titles. I'm learning that, she replied. Slowly, but I'm learning. My career continued to flourish. I started consulting on the side, helping startups develop their technical infrastructure. The additional income went into investments and savings, building wealth that reflected years of discipline and smart choices. Everything I had, I'd earned. That knowledge provided a satisfaction no amount of parental approval could ever match. 5 years after refusing their bailout request, I attended a family wedding. Chloe was there with a boyfriend she'd met at work, someone who treated her with respect, rather than adoration. They seemed happy in a quiet, stable way. My parents looked older, smaller somehow, but content in their modest circumstances. Aunt Carol pulled me aside during the reception. You know what I've noticed, she said. Your parents finally treat you and Chloe equally now. I glanced across the room, watching Mom chat with both of us, no obvious favoritism. What changed? Consequences, Aunt Carol said simply. They learned the same lesson Chloe did. Actions matter. Choices have results. They can't undo the past, but they're trying to do better in the present. That's something. I suppose it's more than something, she corrected gently. It's growth. Not everyone is capable of it. As I watched my family navigate this new dynamic, fragile but more honest than before, I felt something unexpected. Not forgiveness, exactly, but perhaps the beginning of peace. They'd learned what I'd always known: fairness requires accountability. Love requires respect. And help without boundaries ultimately harms everyone involved. My success hadn't made me heartless. It had made me clear-eyed about relationships, about boundaries, and about what I deserved from people who claimed to love me. That clarity, earned through years of struggling alone, was worth more than any amount of parental support could have provided. I built something real from nothing. I succeeded despite obstacles, not because of advantages, and created a life that reflected my values, not anyone else's expectations. That was mine. It would always be mine. And nobody, not my parents, not my sister, not anyone, could diminish that achievement by demanding I sacrifice it for their mistakes. The wedding wound down as evening approached. I said goodbye to family, promised to stay in touch with the ones I genuinely liked, and drove home to my condo. Tomorrow, I'd wake up in a space I'd earned, go to work I'd secured through merit, and continue building a future based on my choices, not anyone else's demands. Fairness, I'd learned, wasn't something given. It was something claimed through boundaries, maintained through consistency, and protected through the strength to say no when necessary. I claimed mine. That knowledge provided more satisfaction than any family reconciliation ever could. The past remained complicated and painful, but it no longer controlled my present. I'd broken free through determination and self-reliance, building something nobody could take away because nobody had given it to me. That independence, hard-won and carefully guarded, was the truest success I'd ever achieved. And I'd done it entirely alone, which made it entirely mine. That was enough. Have you ever had to draw a hard line with family to protect what you've built for yourself?